The vast expanse of the Galactic Council chamber thrummed with urgency, its pulsating hues reflecting the tension gripping every representative present. This was no ordinary meeting, it was a desperate assembly to confront a threat that could annihilate all life in the galaxy. Hovering platforms carried luminous beings, amorphous blobs rippled with agitation, and towering insectoids clicked their mandibles in synchronized rhythms of disapproval. Yet amidst this harmony of shared thought, one group stood as an island of disconnection. The humans were seated at the far end of the chamber, their presence a stark contrast to the telepathic web buzzing among the other delegates. Where most species had evolved to share thoughts in unified networks, humanity's lack of a hive mind was an anomaly. To many it was perceived as a weakness, an evolutionary oddity that forced them to rely on vocal communication and diverse individual actions. Yet, this very difference had often allowed humanity to innovate and survive in ways others could not. But today, as the galaxy faced an unprecedented threat, that very peculiarity had brought them to the forefront. At the center of the chamber, a projection shimmered to life, casting eerie shadows across the assembly. The image was unmistakable. The Dravellan cluster, a once thriving region of the galaxy, now a dark, pulsating void. Tendrils of energy snaked out from the epicenter, consuming entire star systems in their wake. The room fell silent as the projection zoomed in on a single planet, its surface crawling with a nightmarish swarm of biomechanical constructs, their every movement synchronized with unerring precision. The Hive-born plague, intoned Counselor Siren, an elongated being of pure energy whose voice resonated like a choir of bells. It spreads faster than light, assimilating every form of life into its collective consciousness. Our attempts to contain it have failed. Entire fleets obliterated. Entire worlds lost. The projection flickered, showing footage of the last battle against the plague. Ships of the Ralvathan Empire, renowned for their unmatched coordination, moved in perfect formation to intercept the swarm. Yet within moments the Hive-born adapted. Their constructs mirrored the Ralvathan strategy, exploiting its predictability to devastating effect. The fleet was torn apart, their defeat a grim testament to the plague's power. Counselor Siren turned to address the assembly. The Hive-born exploit our greatest strength, our unity. They adapt to our shared strategies, turning them against us. Unless we find an alternative, the galaxy is doomed. The room erupted in a cacophony of telepathic exchanges, the overlapping streams of thought creating a chaotic ripple in the chamber's psychic field. Amidst the turbulence, a single voice cut through, spoken aloud and startling in its clarity. Then stop fighting as one. All eyes turned to Captain Diana Rourke, the human representative. She stood with a confidence that seemed at odds with the grim situation. Her uniform, though unadorned compared to the ceremonial garb of her counterparts, bore the marks of countless campaigns. Beside her, Lieutenant Adam Voss leaned forward, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Counselor Kalen, a crystalline entity whose refracted light danced across the room, shifted their focus to Diana. Elaborate human. Your species has no hive mind. How can you possibly comprehend the magnitude of this threat? Diana smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both weariness and resolve. You're right. We don't have a hive mind. We don't share thoughts or strategies at the speed of light. But that's exactly why we're still here. Her words hung in the air, the silence in the chamber almost tangible, broken only by the faint hum of telepathic currents shifting in disbelief. The crystalline glow of Counselor Kalen dimmed momentarily, and the serpentine Nivara coiled tighter, her scales shimmering in hesitant acknowledgement. She stepped closer to the central platform, her boots echoing against the polished floor. For centuries, humanity has faced threats that should have wiped us out. Catastrophic wars, plagues, natural disasters, and every time we survived because of one thing, our unpredictability. We're not bound by collective thought. Our individuality makes us chaotic, yes, but it also makes us adaptable in ways no hive mind can predict. Counselor Siren's form dimmed, signaling skepticism. Chaos is not a strategy, Captain Rourke. It is a liability. Diana's gaze sharpened. Not when you're fighting an enemy that thrives on order. The Hive-born analyze patterns, exploit uniformity. But they can't adapt to what they can't anticipate. That's where we come in. The murmurs in the room grew louder, both telepathic and vocal. The Andar Collective's crystalline forms pulsed in synchronized patterns of disapproval, while the gelatinous Zorvian delegates quivered with uncertainty. A serpentine member of the Mindweave Syndicate coiled tighter, its flickering scales betraying a mix of intrigue and hesitation. Even the usually stoic Kaltorians exchanged glances, their armored forms vibrating faintly as they processed the implications. Counselor Navarra, a serpentine being with scales that shimmered like molten silver, uncoiled from her platform. What exactly are you proposing, human? That we abandon millennia of evolution to embrace chaos? Not abandon, Diana corrected. Augment. Let humanity take point. We'll act as the unpredictable element in your fleets, disrupting the Hive-born while your forces provide coordinated support. Together we can turn their strength into a weakness. Counselor Kalen's crystalline form pulsed with light, a reflection of their internal debate. And if your chaos fails? If your unpredictability becomes our undoing? Diana's voice hardened. Then we'll fall knowing we tried something different. But if we don't act now, the Hive-born will consume us all, one predictable strategy at a time. For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then a deep, guttural voice rumbled from the far corner. Counselor Gorath, a hulking, armored beast from the Zorak Dominion, rose to his full height. His kind rarely spoke, their actions often speaking louder than words. But when they did, the galaxy listened. Let the humans lead, Gorath growled, his voice like grinding stone. We have tried unity. Let us see what chaos can achieve. The statement sent ripples through the assembly. One by one, the other counselors began to nod, their psychic fields signaling reluctant agreement. Finally, Counselor Siren spoke. Very well, Captain Rourke. The Galactic Council grants humanity command of the Vanguard fleet. May your chaos bring order to this war. Diana inclined her head. We won't let you down. Hours later, aboard the Endeavour, humanity's flagship, Diana stood in the war room with her senior officers. The holographic table before them displayed a three-dimensional map of the battlefield. Tendrils of Hive-born forces stretched across the galaxy, their movements precise and relentless. We're going to hit them where it hurts, Diana said, her tone sharp with determination, her finger tracing a path along the map. Her piercing gaze swept across the room, daring anyone to question her resolve, while her stance, firm and unyielding, radiated confidence. Their supply nodes. Cut off their resources and they'll falter. Lieutenant Voss frowned. But won't they adapt to that strategy? Diana nodded. Eventually. That's why we won't stick to it. Every strike will be different. Decentralized commands, shifting objectives. They'll never know what's coming next. Commander Lee, a seasoned tactician, crossed her arms. It's risky. If even one of our cells falters, the whole operation could collapse. That's the point, Diana replied. We're not aiming for perfection. We're aiming for disruption. The Hive-born are a machine. We're going to throw a wrench into their gears. The officers exchanged uneasy glances but nodded in agreement. They had signed up for this knowing humanity's unorthodox approach was their greatest strength, and their greatest risk. Prepare the fleet, Diana ordered. We launch at dawn. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do. The Endeavour streaked through hyperspace, its hull glowing faintly as it navigated the volatile currents of interstellar travel. Around it, the Vanguard fleet moved in seemingly chaotic formations, deliberately designed to avoid the rigid predictability of the Galactic Council forces. This was by design. Diana's plan emphasized adaptive maneuvering, requiring her crews to operate independently and make rapid decisions, a shift they embraced with a mixture of skepticism and resolve. In the briefing room, a diverse group of officers and advisors from the allied species gathered around a holographic projection. Diana stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding as she detailed the next phase of their strategy. The Hive-born have a central supply hub here, she said, pointing to a glowing node on the map. It's heavily fortified, but it's also critical to their operations in this sector. If we take it out, we'll disrupt their logistics and force them to redirect their forces. A Ralvathan officer, his elongated, insectoid frame gleaming under the room's lights, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Our forces have attempted similar strikes before, but the Hive-born's adaptability neutralized our efforts. How will this be different? Diana's gaze was steady. Because we're not relying on a single strategy. Our approach will be diverse and flexible, allowing each unit to operate independently and exploit the Hive-born's rigidity. Each unit will have its own objective and method of attack. The Hive-born struggle to adapt to strategies that evolve in real time, leaving them vulnerable to dynamic and unconventional tactics. Another voice spoke up, this one belonging to Counselor Navarra. Her serpentine form coiled elegantly as she regarded Diana with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. And if your fragmented forces are overwhelmed? What then? Then we improvise, Diana said simply. That's the advantage of being human. We don't need a hive mind to adapt. We trust our people to make decisions in the moment. And that's something the Hive-born will never understand. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Finally, Commander Lee broke the tension. I'll coordinate with the cell leaders. They'll need clear fallback options and contingency plans. Good, Diana said. Make sure every unit knows the stakes. This isn't just about winning a battle. It's about showing the galaxy that the Hive-born can be beaten. The first strike came swiftly and without warning. A small detachment of human and allied ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Hive-born supply hub. Instead of forming a single battle line, the ships scattered, each targeting a different part of the Hive-born's defenses. Railgun fire and plasma bolts lit up the void as the Vanguard fleet unleashed its fury. The Hive-born reacted with their usual precision, swarms of biomechanical constructs surging to intercept the attackers. But as they adjusted to counter one unit, another struck from an unexpected angle. The decentralized nature of the assault fractured the Hive-born's cohesion, forcing their biomechanical constructs to divide resources between a flurry of unpredictable maneuvers. One squad detonated decoys that emitted false energy signatures, while another launched precise strikes on weak points, leaving the Hive-born struggling to regain control. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Diana watched the battle unfold with a keen eye. Her officers relayed updates from the field, their voices steady despite the chaos. Unit Delta reports successful penetration of the outer defenses, Lieutenant Voss said. They're moving to disable the energy nodes? Good, Diana replied. Tell them to keep moving. The Hive-born will regroup quickly. As the battle raged on, the unpredictability of the human-led forces began to take its toll. Hive-born constructs faltered as their synchronization was disrupted, their once impenetrable formations crumbling under the relentless assault. Yet even as victory seemed within reach, new challenges emerged. We've got incoming, Commander Lee reported. A Hive-born reinforcement fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. They're adapting faster than we anticipated. Diana's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. Alert all units. Shift to contingency plans. We'll draw them away from the hub while the demolition teams finish the job. The fleet adjusted seamlessly, each unit executing its own version of the fallback strategy. Some engaged the reinforcements directly, using hit-and-run tactics to keep them occupied. Others feigned retreats, luring the Hive-born into ambushes. It was a chaotic dance, but one that humanity's unpredictability had perfected. Amid the turmoil, Diana's voice carried across the comm channels, steady and resolute. Her unwavering tone seemed to cut through the chaos, instilling confidence in her crew as they fought against overwhelming odds. Each word reinforced their belief in the mission and reminded them of the trust she placed in their abilities. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. The Hive-born believe disarray is our weakness, but it is our greatest strength. They underestimate the resolve that unites us in chaos. Stick to the plan and we'll show them what chaos really looks like. By the time the battle ended, the Hive-born supply hub was in ruins. The Vanguard fleet, though battered, had achieved a decisive victory. For the first time, the Hive-born's aura of invincibility had been shattered, sending ripples of hope through the Allied forces. The once dominant Hive-born, a symbol of relentless inevitability, had been forced into retreat, and the victory galvanized a renewed sense of determination across the Vanguard. For many, it was proof that the Hive-born were not invincible, and that unity born of diversity could challenge even the most formidable foe. Aboard the Endeavour, Diana stood on the observation deck, watching as the surviving ships regrouped. Below her, the galaxy's most unlikely alliance was celebrating a victory that many had thought impossible. Yet Diana's expression remained resolute. This battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Hive-born retreat from the supply hub was swift, but it left a trail of destruction and questions. For the Allied fleet, the victory marked the first tangible proof that the Hive-born's seemingly impenetrable grip could be broken. Yet aboard the Endeavour, the tension was palpable. While the decentralized strategy had proven effective, it came at a significant cost, leaving Diana Rourke and her crew bracing for the inevitable Hive-born counteroffensive. Status report, Diana ordered, her voice steady as she surveyed the battle-worn bridge. Screens flickered with data streams, and the hum of the ship's engines was a constant backdrop. We've lost 15% of the Vanguard fleet, Lieutenant Voss reported, his tone grim. Another 30% have sustained critical damage. Repair crews are stretched thin, and some ships are barely holding together. Diana nodded, her jaw tightening. And the Hive-born? Their forces have regrouped in the Varith Nebula, Voss continued. Scouts report unusual movements, suggesting they're testing new tactical formations. They're massing for a counteroffensive, but this shift in strategy means they might strike from multiple fronts. Commander Lee stepped forward, her expression sharp. They're adapting faster than before. It's as if they've learned from our tactics already. The next engagement won't be so easy. Diana's gaze swept over the gathered officers. The room was heavy with unspoken concerns, but she saw no fear in their eyes, only resolve. That's why we're going to change the rules again. They may learn, but they're still playing by their own limits. We're not. The next phase of the campaign demanded more than tactical ingenuity, it required an understanding of the Hive-born psychology. Diana convened a meeting with the Vanguard's top minds, including representatives from the Galactic Council. The war room buzzed with tension as holographic displays lit up with swirling patterns of data, projections of Hive-born movement, and models of potential strategies. Counselor Navarra's serpentine form shifted as she studied the displays. The Hive-born's adaptations are accelerating. Their neural network is clearly evolving in response to our unpredictability. How do you propose we stay ahead of them? Diana leaned forward, her fingers tapping on the edge of the table. We don't just stay ahead. We make them react to something they've never encountered before. The room fell silent as she continued. The Hive-born's greatest strength is their synchronization, enabling unparalleled unity, but it's also their Achilles heel. Over-reliance on this network leaves them vulnerable to targeted disruption. Every decision flows through their central neural nexus. If we disrupt that connection even temporarily, we can force them into disarray. Counselor Kalen's crystalline form pulsed with skepticism. Disrupting the nexus would require an assault deep within their territory. Such a mission would be suicidal. Not if we make them come to us, Diana replied. She activated a new hologram, revealing a star system with a dense asteroid field. The Eridan Rift. It's close enough to their neural nexus that any activity there will draw their attention. We'll stage a feint, a series of hit-and-run attacks designed to lure them into the rift. Once they're inside, we trigger an EMP pulse to sever their network. Even a few minutes of disruption will give us the edge we need. The room erupted into murmurs, some of approval, others of concern. Commander Lee's voice cut through the noise. It's bold, but the risks are enormous. If they realize it's a feint, they'll counter before we can execute the EMP. That's why we need to make it convincing, Diana said. We'll divide the fleet into smaller strike groups, each targeting a different Hive-born asset. They'll have no choice but to respond. Counselor Navarra tilted her head, her silver scales catching the light. And what if the EMP fails? Diana's gaze was steady. Then we improvise as we always do. The Eridan Rift was a graveyard of ancient stellar debris, its asteroid fields dense enough to confuse even the most advanced sensors. It was the perfect stage for humanity's gambit. The Vanguard fleet strike groups moved into position, their ships darting between asteroids as they launched targeted assaults on Hive-born outposts. Each attack was precise, leveraging the cover of the dense asteroid field to confuse the Hive-born sensors while targeting critical outposts. The crews faced constant challenges, from navigating treacherous debris to executing split-second maneuvers, but their efforts ensured maximum impact with minimal exposure. On the bridge of the Endeavour, Diana monitored the operation with laser focus. Reports streamed in from the strike groups, each detailing successful engagements and strategic withdrawals. The Hive-born's forces, true to form, converged on the rift, their movements calculated yet increasingly strained. Group Theta reports heavy resistance, Voss said, his voice clipped. They're pulling back to Sector 7? Good, Diana replied. Keep the pressure on. We need them fully committed before we spring the trap. As the Hive-born forces entered the rift, the Vanguard fleet began its final maneuver. Smaller ships deployed EMP devices, carefully positioning them along the Hive-born's approach vectors. The devices were experimental, their effectiveness unproven, but they represented the best chance of disrupting the Hive-born's neural network. All units fall back to designated safe zones, Diana ordered. Prepare to detonate the EMP on my signal. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the Hive-born fleet advanced deeper into the rift. Their constructs moved with eerie precision, their every action synchronized by the Nexus. It was a display of unity that would have overwhelmed most adversaries, but Diana saw the flaw in their perfection. Now, she commanded. The EMP devices detonated in a cascade of electromagnetic pulses, their shockwaves rippling through the rift. The Hive-born constructs shuddered as their synchronization faltered, their movements becoming erratic and disjointed. For the first time, the Hive-born were forced to operate as individuals, and the result was chaos. "Target their capital ships," Diana ordered, her voice sharp. "Take advantage of the disruption and push them back." The Vanguard fleet surged forward, their strikes not only coordinated and flexible but also exploiting newly discovered Hive-born vulnerabilities. One team targeted the weakened propulsion systems of capital ships, while another disrupted energy relays, creating cascading failures in their defenses. Ships darted through the asteroid field, exploiting gaps in the Hive-born's defenses. The battle was fierce, but the disruption of the neural nexus had shifted the tide. One by one, the Hive-born's capital ships fell, their destruction sending shockwaves through the remaining forces. By the time the dust settled, the Eridan Rift was littered with the wreckage of Hive-born constructs. The Vanguard fleet had suffered losses, but the victory was undeniable. For the first time, the Hive-born's neural nexus had been compromised, and their invincibility shattered further. Aboard the Endeavour, Diana stood in the war room, surrounded by her officers and the Galactic Council representatives. The atmosphere was a mix of relief and determination. "This victory doesn't end the war," Diana said, her tone firm. "But it proves that the Hive-born can be beaten. They're not invincible and we'll keep finding ways to outthink them." Counselor Navarra inclined her head, her serpentine form coiling gracefully. "You've given the galaxy hope, Captain Rourke. But hope alone won't win this war." "No," Diana agreed. "But it's a start. And sometimes that's all we need." The Eridan Rift had gone silent. Where once the Hive-born constructs moved with eerie precision, now the shattered remnants of their fleet floated as grim testaments to the Allied forces' resolve. The victory, though hard-fought, felt like a turning point, a defiance of inevitability and a spark of hope in a galaxy on edge. Yet aboard the Endeavour, the victory was not met with celebration but with quiet resolve. The crew recognized that while this victory had shifted the tide, the war's cost weighed heavily. This battle was not an end but a critical moment to rally their resolve for the challenges ahead. Captain Diana Rourke stood on the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the rift. Below her, the surviving ships of the Vanguard fleet regrouped, their movements a testament to the resilience of a strategy built on adaptability and courage. Beside her, Lieutenant Voss approached, data pad in hand. "Status?" Diana asked, her voice calm but edged with the weight of responsibility. "The fleet is stabilizing," Voss replied. "Repairs are underway, but several ships are too damaged to rejoin the fight. Casualty reports are still coming in, but it's significant." Diana's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "And the Hive-born?" "The disruption to their nexus is holding for now," Voss said. "Scouts report that their remaining forces have retreated deeper into their territory. Fragmented without their neural synchronization, the Hive-born constructs move erratically, their once unified patterns devolving into scattered and inefficient skirmishes. It's a level of disarray we've never seen from them before." "Then we've bought ourselves some time," Diana said. "Time to prepare for what comes next." In the war room, the atmosphere was heavy with a mix of exhaustion and determination. Representatives from the Galactic Council gathered around the holographic table, their expressions reflecting both the cost of the battle and the hope it had kindled. Counselor Navarra's serpentine form coiled tightly as she studied the data. "This victory is significant," Navarra said. "But the Hive-born will adapt. They always do. We cannot rely on the same tactics to succeed again." Diana leaned forward, her presence commanding the room. "We won't." This battle was about proving that the Hive-born can be defeated, but the next steps require evolving faster than they can. Now the Allied forces must adapt, leveraging their unique strengths to dismantle Hive-born control one system at a time. Their strength lies in their centralization. Ours lies in our individuality. Counselor Kalen's crystalline form pulsed with thought. "Your strategies have proven effective, Captain Rourke. But how do you propose to sustain this momentum? Our fleets are depleted, and the Hive-born's numbers remain overwhelming." "We turn their strength into their weakness," Diana replied. She activated a new hologram, displaying key Hive-born-controlled systems. With their nexus disrupted, their forces are vulnerable to fragmentation. We'll target their supply chains, their communication hubs, and their resource planets. Every strike will force them to overextend, weakening their ability to adapt. Counselor Gorath, the hulking Zorak representative, let out a low growl of approval. "You speak of dismantling an empire piece by piece. A bold plan." "Bold is all we have," Diana said. "But we won't do it alone. This isn't just humanity's fight. The Hive-born threaten every species in the galaxy. If we stand together, our diversity will be their undoing. Over the following weeks, the Vanguard fleet's decentralized strategy became the foundation of a galaxy-wide resistance. Fleets from dozens of species, inspired by humanity's success, adapted their tactics to prioritize adaptability and improvisation. No longer bound by the rigidity of hive mind coordination, the Allied forces launched a relentless campaign against the Hiveborn. Strike teams targeted resource worlds with surgical precision, crippling the Hiveborn's ability to replenish their war machines. Communication hubs were destroyed, isolating entire segments of their fleet. Each victory, while small on its own, compounded into a devastating cascade of disruptions. Diana led from the front, her strategies pushing the boundaries of conventional warfare. On one mission, her team infiltrated a Hiveborn-controlled shipyard, planting decoys that lured their forces into an ambush. On another, she coordinated a simultaneous attack across 3 sectors, forcing the Hiveborn to spread their remaining forces thin. Despite the growing momentum, the cost of the war weighed heavily on every allied species. Losses mounted with each engagement, and the shadow of the Hiveborn's relentless adaptation loomed over every victory. Yet hope persisted, fueled by the knowledge that their collective efforts were breaking an enemy once thought invincible. Months later, the final confrontation took place above a barren, uncharted planet deep within Hiveborn territory. Intelligence reports suggested that this world housed the remnants of the Hiveborn's primary neural nexus, their last bastion of central coordination. The Allied fleet assembled, a tapestry of ships from across the galaxy, united by a shared purpose. Diana stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, her crew poised for what they all knew would be the defining moment of the war. The holographic display showed the planet below, its surface bristling with Hiveborn defenses. This would be their most dangerous mission yet. "All units, this is Captain Rourke," Diana said, her voice carrying across the fleet's comm channels. "Today we end this war. The Hiveborn have taken countless lives, but they've underestimated what we can achieve together. Stick to the plan, trust your instincts, and remember, chaos is our strength. Let's show them what it means to be free." The battle that followed was unlike any other. The Hiveborn, driven to desperation, unleashed their full might. Swarms of constructs surged from the planet's surface, colliding with the Allied fleet in a cataclysmic clash of fire and metal. Yet the diversity of the Allied forces proved to be their greatest weapon. Each species brought unique strengths to the fight, from the Zorak's unbreakable shields to the Mindweave Syndicate's disorienting psychic assaults. Amid the chaos, Diana led a strike team to the surface, navigating through relentless Hiveborn fire and treacherous terrain. The constructs defending the neural nexus unleashed waves of biomechanical drones, forcing the team to improvise at every turn. A collapsing corridor nearly trapped them, but Diana's quick thinking, rerouting power to destabilize the drone systems, allowed them to press forward. Their path was perilous, but their adaptability proved decisive. The mission was perilous, with Hiveborn constructs defending the nexus with ferocity. But the team's unpredictability, a hallmark of humanity's approach, allowed them to outmaneuver the enemy. As the strike team breached the nexus chamber, Diana planted the final charge. The device pulsed with energy, its countdown ticking toward detonation. "All units, fall back," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We're done here." The team evacuated just as the charge detonated, unleashing a shockwave that rippled through the Hiveborn network. Across the battlefield, their constructs faltered, their coordination shattered. What remained of their fleet was swiftly overwhelmed by the Allied forces. In the aftermath of the battle, the Allied fleet gathered above the now silent planet. The Hiveborn threat, once insurmountable, had been extinguished. Cheers erupted across the comm channels, a collective celebration of a victory born from unity and sacrifice. Aboard the Endeavor, Diana stood in the war room, surrounded by her officers and the Galactic Council representatives. Counselor Navarra spoke first, her voice tinged with awe. "You've done the impossible, Captain Rourke. The Hiveborn are no more." Diana nodded, her expression tempered by the weight of what they had achieved. "This victory wasn't mine alone. It belonged to everyone who stood together, who believed that our differences make us stronger." Counselor Kalen's crystalline form pulsed warmly. "Humanity has shown us a new way to fight, one that values individuality and unpredictability. You've changed the way we see ourselves, Captain." "Then let's make sure it lasts," Diana said. "The Hiveborn are gone, but there will always be new threats. If we stand together, we can face anything." As the Allied fleet prepared to return to their respective worlds, Diana allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The war had cost them dearly, but it had also proven a fundamental truth. Unity was not about uniformity. It was about finding strength in diversity, about standing together without losing what made each of them unique. And for humanity, that truth would always be their greatest weapon.